We are inching, and I really do mean inching towards the start of the Toronto FC season. This week we found out the venue and probable date for TFC's first game of 2021, but there's so many more hurdles to go before we get there. This is Wake the Red Weekly presented by Footy Talks. My name is Mitchell Tierney, and I know we've said this a lot in recent weeks, but we really do have a jam-packed show this week with a lot of things to talk about. We could probably spend the entire show alone on the Canadian Championship and all the drama that is associated with that, but we'll also talk about some potential player moves, where Toronto FC will play next season, as well as potentially the Olympic qualifying roster. We'll see whether that drops during our show or not. I also can't believe I haven't done this before, but a huge shout out to Vast Robot Armies, their song Little Detroit. You can hear that off the top. We should have done that a while ago, but definitely go check out their music, as we really appreciate.
Sorry, Jason.
Yeah, we really appreciate them letting us use it. That was a lot of talking. Michael saying, Jeffrey B. Nesker, when do you guys go now?
I got you, Mitch, man. I took a stroll outside today, and man, I didn't need my winter jacket. What is going on? It's almost like there's time for some footy around the corner. It's almost like we're getting there, boys.
Well, I don't think you need a jacket in Florida, which is where it looks like Toronto FC will be playing anyway. But yeah, no, definitely nice to have the better weather right now. That's for sure. How you doing, Jeff?
I'm good. As someone whose parents live 6 months out of the year in Miami during the winter months, I'll tell you something. Florida locals, they wear parkas in their winter, even though it's 35 degrees outside, and it's one of the craziest things I've ever seen because I'm melting in like a Speedo and not, whatever. But and they're
Jeff, let's get that image out of our head. Nobody wants to picture you in a Speedo,
right? Anyway, what else is going on in TFC?
Yeah, let's start with the I guess the biggest news for Toronto FC right now, which of course is the COVID outbreak. Unfortunate news released yesterday that multiple members of the TFC team delegation have tested positive for the virus. For the time being, of course, they're not training, doing contact tracing, follow-up testing, all that usual protocol stuff. I think first and foremost, we hope everyone's healthy and is recovering from this in a good manner. But of course, there's a ton of implications for this as well, aren't there?
Oh boy.
Yeah, I think as Mitch said, first and foremost, just like we hope everybody's okay. We're not pointing fingers at anyone. We don't know. There's just too much to uncover there. We just hope for the best and we hope for a quick recovery because, we all knew this was the inherent risk that Toronto FC was taking when they decided to obviously attend preseason early and start training camp early. It's a risk that everybody's taken around MLS, and this is what worst case scenario, I guess you can call it, because the team obviously got hit with COVID. And perhaps it does put a dent into that potential March 20th date that was floating around for that Canadian Championship. We'll see. Not only that, but we can also talk about Olympic qualifiers. We know TFC were already hesitant to send some of their young guys over to Olympic qualifying. And, I can't say that this helps out that situation by any means. We know even if it isn't one of the young players that perhaps got hit with COVID or whoever it was, perhaps that there's a position there now that needs some shoring up, and perhaps it'll be through that young guy. So there's a bunch of ramifications that really come from this. And it's tough to speculate right now because there's just so much to uncover.
2021 is going to 2021, just like 2020 was going to 2020. Yeah. What are you gonna do? It's just I didn't have on my bingo card. Let's just segue to the whole kit and caboodle, right? The Forge controversy, the Bob Young old man yelling at clouds letter, the proposed dates from Forge's side versus the actual. Who didn't see this coming? I did. I know I've said it on the show months ago as we were discussing potential dates for this game to take place. We're in crunch time now. There are no other dates. When is the match against Club Lyon scheduled?
April 7th.
Yeah,
exactly. So if we can step back 20 minutes, because I certainly didn't have it on my bingo card this week that my two local clubs would go to war against each other. But
well, let's paint the picture. Let's paint the picture up for everyone.
Have you noticed I'm wearing black?
We all are, I guess. So Forge FC obviously haven't been given permission from the Canadian government or the provincial government or whatever to start training, while Toronto FC have. Forge FC's owner was obviously pretty upset about the fact that they haven't been given permission. They said CSA hasn't been really responsive to them. So then he obviously took to the public route and decided to write that open letter asking why hasn't Forge been given training or permission to train. From my perspective,
hold on. And then they floated April the 4th as a possible date.
They floated April for the 4th?
Yeah, they said, we don't want to do March the 20th. Let's do April the 4th. It works better for us. Well, that works terrible for everyone because they play Club Leon in 3 days. How are they going to get to Mexico?
In Mexico.
In Mexico.
The 2 national team games that will be happening March 25th.
I didn't get there yet, Mitch. We're going to table what it does to the Canadian men's national team and just discuss the logical ramifications. Like, there's no time left. There's no time left. This is already too late. March the 20th. It's already too late.
Terrible time. But the good news to take away from this is what Ali Curtis said, and he really said that it started off with one case, and that's kind of elevated into a small number of cases. So if there is a positive to take away from this, it's that the whole TFC training camp, although it has been discontinued, hasn't been hit with COVID. It's a small number of personnel that have. So, perhaps in a couple of days, we will see Toronto FC open back up and get right back on track. But what I want to get back at there, the dates is, as Mitch touched on, is there's not really much time to move around the game. You have the international matches for Canada, World Cup qualifying, that I think is March 25th. Is the date for that first match, and they have another one I think a couple days later on the 28th or something like that. So you can't really move the game into a FIFA international window period. I don't think that's even allowed. And then you think about men's Olympic qualifiers, which perhaps isn't the most important thing on our radar, but there are a couple Forge players who potentially considered to get into that side. There are obviously TFC players that were considered to get inside, but that's something they can skip. So if TFC hypothetically are healthy by the time March 20th comes around, like they could move the date back a day or two potentially to have it work. But if not, then that game has to be rescheduled for sometime early April. And as you said, we play Club Leon on the 7th. That's tight. So this COVID.
I like they said we play Club Leon on the 7th.
Yeah.
Let me get my boots on, boys. But that's tight, man. It's tight to move that around, and I hope that this is all in the past behind us sooner rather than later. TFC will give us an update later this week on what's going down, but hopefully, we can just find a resolution and get back to what we're looking forward to, and that's just playing footy.
Honestly, like it's they're so. I have one. That letter rubbed me the wrong way, the Bob Young letter, because weren't Forge one of those early perk enjoying teams? Remember when the CPL was like separating based on who had signed their paperwork first, and some teams got an unfair
so they
advantage.
Got the CONCACAF League berth was based on that.
Yeah, who filed their paperwork first? Where were the open letters then? Do you know what I mean? Also, and I think this is my trump card, it's CONCACAF. When has CONCACAF ever been fair? Independent of a pandemic, when has the Champions League ever been a fair tournament? I mean, MLS sides usually come in like ice cold to face Liga MX sides that are midway through their season. So this illusion of fairness, independent of the world that we're living in right now, is already flawed logic. I mean, it's CONCACAF, so fair and CONCACAF are mutually exclusive terms. And then, it's a pandemic. So it's. I mean, you couldn't have scripted it better, right? There were so many people complaining about Forge's inability to train. as the rationale behind whether or not they would be able to be competitive in this game. And now TFC can't train, so we're right back to square
We're
one.
even, guys. We're even.
Yeah,
No,
we're
but
even.
let's talk about why. I'm curious. Why hasn't Forge been given permission to start training? Do you guys have any idea as to any possibility why?
Well, this legislation was written on the fly because prior to COVID, there was no, who falls under the guise of a professional sporting, you know what I mean? Like this was written as a knee-jerk reaction, and like most pieces of bureaucracy that are written as knee-jerk reaction, it was probably boilerplate. And in the same way that when we swooped in to Club Genk to get pause, and we're like, hey guys, we're a league too. Our transfer rules are right there under FIFA rules. Sorry you forgot about them, but we're going to unlock his transfer clause. You need to be proactive. There have been so many conspiracy theories thrown around that Forge, were expecting to win their berth in the Champions League for any of the other 60,000 opportunities they had prior to this one that they managed to not succeed in. And so this was on the back burner. But then you don't get to cry foul, especially now. I
got to say, Jeff, I disagree a little bit.
Were TFC at the top of everybody's list as a professional sports because they're in the public consciousness? Absolutely. Did the CPL maybe have to do more to turn the heads of the people writing that legislation? Possibly. But, then do it.
I don't want to speculate too much, but it could just come down to like the plan that Toronto FC laid out versus the plan that Forge laid out. I mean, if you're MLSE, first off, you have a lot more people in your organization who can take care of these sort of things, and you have proof of concept. You can be like, look at what we did with the Leafs, look what we've done with the Raptors. There's been minimal outbreaks, both those teams. We've already had success doing this, so we'll follow the same protocols with Toronto FC returning to training. And maybe that's one thing that can convince the Canadian government versus we don't know what Forge FC's plan looks like.
The other league we operate, we close down. You know what I mean? Like, please, we're a professional organization. Like, recognize your union, release your numbers, which they've done. But don't give me these platitudes that the big bad wolf. What am I, stupid? Why don't I understand this? I mean, of course you understand this. You're a businessman. MLSE has more money. They've got proof of concept. They're absolutely going to be suggesting dates that are in their own best interest. And unfortunately, their own best interests align a lot stronger with what the CSA wants to do in terms of Olympic qualifying and the player pool that they want to draw from. So them's the breaks, kiddo. What do you want to do? Like, do we want to sit around and cry about it, or do we want to proactively make it better? And it just seemed like a lot of sour grapes, and I don't like sour grapes.
Number one rule that I was.
Could you picture Bill Manning writing that tweet? That's another question I have. And if he did, would we be giving him the same R? Because I'd like to think I would, because it's a bit mawkish.
I think Bill Manning probably has a little bit bigger of a platform to use than Forge FC's owner. But what I was going to say is just like the first rule that I was taught in journalism school is follow the money. Follow the money. And if you do follow the money, you'll find that Forge FC, it's tough to consider them a top class professional team when some of their players are getting paid below minimum wage. Right? It's tough to ask players that are reserves for Forge to commit to a full quarantine, don't go anywhere, don't do anything else type of camp right away for a month, whatnot, if they're making less than, again, minimum wage, a living wage. So for me, that's what, again, I'm speculating, but for me, that's a big factor. And it's just how big you're branded, how big that reach is, and how important that public interest is. And for me, Toronto FC, the public interest in terms of a club like Toronto FC, like you said, they're at the top of the charts in terms of people hoping to see this club get back to training. Ford comes a little bit below that. And one day I hope to see them on that same level. However, we're not there yet. We're not there yet in terms of payments, and we're not there yet in terms of how big that club is. So have they been brushed to the side? Yeah. Is it fair? Perhaps not.
What's fair? Like, I mean, we've been living in a universe of unfair for going on a
That's
year and
exactly it.
change now, right? And it's CONCACAF, which the word fair melts to dust when you bring the word fair close to the word CONCACAF. It's like matter and antimatter, and the whole universe explodes. So,
and it's the Canadian Championship too, right? Which also hasn't always been quote unquote fair. If you look at, what was it, 2016, Toronto FC won it, and then they're like, you know, that CONCACAF spot you won, you're gonna have to do it again next year to get that CONCACAF spot. So
I
it's not
remember
like
that.
this competition's always been, you know, perfect, perfect in terms of fairness. They've done a lot of things on the fly. So, I just think obviously there are legitimate gripes, but there's certainly two sides to this story.
We're 11 days away from that potential date.
Mm-hmm.
Does Forge, let's say hypothetically it is that date that does get played, does Forge have enough time to prepare for that match?
Well,
11
not
days?
really.
That's tough.
Yeah.
And I understand why Forge FC fans are upset. I understand why Forge is upset. And yeah, sure, it's unfair, but any way that you spin this, like, it's tough. Like, Canada Soccer knew for how long this match was supposed to be played in the first quarter of 2021.
Mm-hmm.
They waited till like the very last second, it looks like, from our opinion, or to sort of squeeze this match in, when hypothetically it could have been done in February or January, or even if you go back to last year, sometime last year. It wouldn't have been easy, but it could have been done. And just like us with school projects or whatever, you wait to the last minute, and sometimes you just get screwed over, man.
Absolutely. Sometimes you gotta take that C-, and you know, because it's looking like, seriously, it's looking like this is going to be a game between, you know, Chris Armis's coaching staff and Bob Young and his kids, right? Like, you know what I mean? And at this point, I'll take it. Well, at this point, I'll take it, because we've thrown around like someone's going to forfeit. You know, the tinfoil hat people on the social medias, or some people are saying that, you know, all of this court of public opinion stuff is just a precursor to Forge forfeiting. Of course, these theories were before TFC announced that they're slightly under the weather now. So, you know, just play it. It doesn't mean as much as it should, but maybe, you know, when everything returns to normal, we do an actual match in front of fans for bragging rights, and Bob's your uncle, right? Like that. It is what it is. It's difficult. It's difficult to get this angry about a match that's proving to be exceedingly impossible to play because of negligence and ignorance from all parties. You know, like, let's be honest. We should have played this game a long time ago. And to now say, well, we don't get our proper before times training to watch our video sessions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if that's the right conversation to be having right now. Somebody's got to play Club Leon, guys. I mean.
At the end of the day, it could just be posturing, right? Like they're just presenting themselves as, you know, we're the huge underdogs here. It just could be a narrative thing.
And TFC is just like, nope, we got hit with COVID.
Yeah.
One up in here.
Hold my beer, Forge.
Let's talk about what probably would have been the two biggest stories. I don't even know if we've mentioned the March 20th date. I don't know if we've mentioned yet that Christian Jack reporting will be played at BMO Field. So another tiny advantage for Toronto FC. Obviously, they're one of the fans there, so it's not as big as what it would have been, and obviously not the spectacle we would have hoped this match would be. But the other bit of news, of course, is Forge FC getting a big player back, and that's 2019 CanPL MVP Tristan Borges, 13 goals, 5 assists for Forge when they won CanPL in its inaugural year. Look, I mean, he's not going to have much time to train with his teammates, but at minimum, this is another guy.
God, I'm so angry. Sorry.
This is another guy who could cause Toronto FC some problems, and another former Toronto FC player. I mean, he spent time with the academy. We can talk about Babuli, Becker. There's a couple of other guys in there as well. There'll be some. I mean, it goes back to the Cavalry beating the Vancouver Whitecaps, right? Like there'll be some revenge games here from the Forge FC side that weren't already the case, which obviously everybody seems to be out for blood right now.
It's a nice boost for their squad. A really nice boost for their squad. I mean, when he was here, he was an absolute difference maker and by far the best player in the league. And you can arguably say he's the best player to ever play in the league. It's unfortunate that after he left, fell off a cliff, and
Well,
to the
didn't
point where he
sorry.
he got a squad number taken away.
He didn't get a squad number. No,
he didn't even
no.
get a squad number in training, and he was just so off the radar. And it's good to see him back to the league. He wants to dominate, and hopefully he can re-find his stride, because it was obviously lost when he departed Forge.
Yeah, didn't he get that worst case scenario where he transferred to UPenn and then immediately they sacked their coach that wanted him? So the new gaffer didn't like him, didn't know him, and then it was just a downward trend. But it is a loan move, right? So I think UPenn's still playing a bit of his salary to come to play in Forge, which is, I guess, the best of both worlds. You know, he can revive his career over there, or he can come back here on a full-term basis.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if there is an option to buy or anything on that deal, because if I'm Forge, I would want that player back, and not just on loan, just because of what he's done for that club and how good he could potentially be in the Canadian Premier League.
But wouldn't they have to lose somebody? I mean, I know that the salary cap information came out yesterday, but I'm pretty sure Forge would have to, like, you know, Borges isn't going to come cheap, so they would have to restructure their roster in some way, shape, or form. Like,
potentially. So is that loan move kind of like a workaround around the cap there?
It's the Blaise Matuidi of the CPL. It has to be. It has to be. It has to be a way to escape salary cap rules, like I said, that we just found out about yesterday, 2 years into Borges back at Forges. Who's we've written a lot of songs about him. If I'm ever allowed to go to a Forge game again,
interested to see what kind of role he'll play in that Canadian Championship against Toronto FC. I'm really interested to see how Forge will use him and see if he can, perhaps make that difference for them.
I gotta ask, who here thinks that the game is actually going to get played?
I do.
I still think so. Yeah, I still think it'll end up.
Yeah, you're still holding on to hope.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's going to be a forfeit party. I think there's going to be a week where everybody's like, I forfeit. No, you forfeit. No, you first. No, you first. And then nobody's going to show up, and it's just going to be Club Leon versus Club Leon. But
I think this game is way too important to both clubs for them to forfeit, because, I mean, even for Forge, right? Like, this is a massive marketing opportunity to go up against one of the better clubs probably in North America, at least, in the past couple of years.
You're talking about Lee Meno, right? The soccer pigs?
Yes, okay. Of course. Yeah.
Way too much PR surrounding this match, as you said, Mitch. Yeah.
We know Bill Manning's past statements on how important CONCACAF is for Toronto FC. So
it's my favorite thing ever. But I mean, guys, like, even if TFC win, or whoever wins is going in to face Club Leon, they're no slouch, and they're in much better match fitness than we are, either team. So, are we really getting that excited to get our asses handed to us by Club Leon in less than a month?
Well, let's get to that hurdle when we get there. I feel like that is, again, we're talking about hurdles. There's so many to clear before we can even start talking about CONCACAF Champions League.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. I mean, I've already bought my tickets to the Club World Cup because I know TFC is gonna be there. But I'm an eternal optimist. It's just, I'd like to see it get played. Look, I would say I'm about 50-50 just because of the unbelievable shithousery that's been going on over the last week and a half. So
yeah, at this point, surprises are kind of off the table.
Yeah.
Well, let's speaking of match fitness, let's talk about who LA Galaxy are looking at bringing in, and that's former Toronto FC player Victor Vasquez. Left Toronto FC in 2018. Of course, rumors out there that he's going to reunite with Coach Greg Vanney, but he hasn't played very much. I was looking at his stats since he left. He's played maybe, I want to say, under 20 games since he left Toronto FC in 2018 between Al Arabi, which is where originally went in Saudi Arabia, most recently in the Belgian first division. I think he only played one match last season. So it's a bit of a curious move if LA Galaxy end up doing it, because, reunions are great, but even, 2018 Vazquez seemed to be on his last legs. I can only imagine, what the pandemic and everything else has done to him.
So sorry, I got my teams mixed up. Borges played for Leuven, and
Mhm.
Victor Vasquez played for Eupen. So
okay, there you go.
I wanted to correct that. Anyway, go ahead,
Huge.
Mike.
Victor Vasquez
Huge.
joined our sister show, Footy Talks, obviously, last season, and he voiced how badly he wanted to come back to Toronto and come back to MLS where he was more comfortable. And his
Not like this. Not
his
like
three
this.
three previous stints. Victor Vasquez, he couldn't find his way into the squad. I mean, for whatever reason, he'd become unsettled. Obviously, it's a move across the world, different continent. Not even this, I wouldn't even consider it like a soccer kind of crazy continent, just a league where he could get paid. And he was honest about the fact that he made a mistake chasing money when he left Toronto FC. He said that on Footy Talks. So, Victor Vasquez to LA Galaxy, to be honest, it makes a lot of sense. The way that he's been training on his Instagram page, it looks like he's preparing to get back into some sort of soccer action. I know from speaking to Greg Vanney last year, actually, about Victor Vasquez, I know that those two still keep in touch, and the fact that Vanney has holds Vazquez incredibly highly and believes that Vazquez will one day be a coach in MLS. This could perhaps be a precursor to that. Where Vanney brings in Vazquez, who again has been out without a club since I think the middle of last summer, and it's a return to MLS just makes so much sense for Vazquez because that's where he's comfortable. That's where he said his family is comfortable, and Vazquez, that's the most important thing to him. Obviously, from a Toronto FC perspective, you don't want to see that happen. But if Vazquez goes to LA Galaxy, I mean, it is what it is. Like, I'm happy for Victor Vasquez because, you know, he gave everything except for after his 2018 departure to Toronto FC and when he was on the field. So, I mean, it's hard to fault him for making that move.
Yeah.
He's got a big surprise coming if he thinks that LA is even a slight bit similar to Toronto in terms of the vibe. So, you know, more power to him. Listen, I know that this is how football works, and I know, you know, Olivier Giroud goes from Arsenal to Chelsea, blah, 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 blah. This is what happens, and no hard feelings, and, you know, everybody's got to get theirs, but I hate this so much. I hate the idea of it. I hate the thought of it. I hate it so much.
It doesn't sting more than Seba, though.
I mean, it sort of does because the rumors, and again, they're just rumors, and I think it was Mitch that said this is like the most clickbaity thing for you to rage at ever, Jeff. But I still raged about it. You know, what was the rumors are he's coming in like under Tam.
Not even a Tam player.
Yeah.
But like, come on, you can't ask Victor Vasquez to come back as a Tam player after he hasn't played in 2 years. There's no way he could be a Tam player in MLS.
Because in MLS when you leave and your transfer fee is higher than $500,000, you're on the allocation list. And Victor Vasquez did leave and is on the allocation list. So not only would LA Galaxy have to spend money to move up from spot 8 or wherever they're at, just to get into talks with Victor, but I mean, this stupid team,
Still,
like what they're just going to grab. Pardon?
He's still not a TAM player. Like, the quality of player that Victor Vasquez is, no chance you spend any sort of TAM on him. Even if he's coming back to Toronto, even if he's coming back to any team in MLS.
Well,
I think 34 years old. Even Victor Vasquez, when he was here, he was on a very good team, and his role that he played was perfect. Like, he didn't have to do too much running. The work around him was being covered by a lot of people, but he filled his niche really nicely. And I don't think that you can pay TAM for him now in 2021. That's just my personal opinion.
No, I think I agree with you, but it just stinks that he's gonna come back on a hometown discount, not to our hometown.
Yeah. Well, he said he was willing to take no money, like doesn't care about money, to come back to Toronto last season. And
so let's take him.
We went over why it would be difficult, and it was the main thing is that allocation process. And again, are you going to spend 300, 400,000 additional, whatever you're on top of whatever you're going to pay him to bring in Victor Vasquez? That's tough. That's a tough pill to swallow for Toronto FC, who are up against the cap. Like, if Victor Vasquez comes, he'll be a nice veteran piece, kind of like I saw someone on Twitter said this, kind of like a Benoit Giroux to Michael Bradley,
so
right?
Good.
Same thing,
so
which is
that
fantastic. But
so
you're not spending out of pocket to do that. You know, you're not taking away from the rest of the team to do that. That would be a nice complementary addition if you have the space. And I don't see
Pause
TFC doing
under
that.
the tutelage of La Masia's own Victor Vasquez. I mean, that gets my
but to
my
be fair,
tail wagging.
to be fair, Paz has accomplished more than Victor Vasquez technically has an MLS aside from bringing home the silverware as a team, right? Like Paz is an MVP. I think we can all agree that Paz is probably a better player than Victor Vasquez. Imagine if you had Paz on that 2017 team. That'd be dumb.
Yeah.
That'd be dumb.
I think certainly what hurts the most of this won't be Vazquez on the field, because I don't know that he's going to bring all that much to
it'll be
Galaxy.
Coach Vazquez.
It's the fact that I think we were all holding out hope that once Vazquez retired, he'd come back to Toronto FC, you know, as in the coaching role in the academy, bring that knowledge. I mean, that's certainly what you hope with a lot of these, you know, guys who think the game like Victor Vasquez. So, you know, this certainly might hurt this, and he might do the same with the LA Galaxy, which would be certainly too bad.
My guess is based on speaking with Greg Vanney, is that connection there with Vazquez to Toronto, that's closer to Greg Vanney than it is to the current front office and the current management, right? So I think that's more reason why Vazquez is following Vanney to LA, perhaps to one day pursue that coaching dream that he has. And hey, honestly, again, like we said, I feel like we've been saying this a bunch on this show, but we do wish him the best of luck if he does end up there.
Just not when they play against us.
Yeah,
man, am I going to enjoy the first TFC LA Galaxy game?
Well, let's talk about another rumor then, which is one that just continues to persist, even, you know, when it seems to be shot down. It seems to not really make sense, and that's Borré to Toronto FC. Reports are that Toronto FC have outbid all the competitors for him. Sounds like 20 million over 3 years coming out of Brazil. The other side of the report, though, is right. 20 over 3.
Yeah, no,
20 over
right.
3 with an option year.
Yeah.
Right, option year. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
And then the other report, of course, is that Borré doesn't necessarily want to come to MLS. He wants to go to Europe. The one thing, and I was talking to Jeff about this pre-show, that you know, if Toronto FC is pursuing this player as hard as the reports are, I highly doubt that he completely doesn't want to come to MLS, because we know how much homework Toronto FC does on players. We saw it with Pozuelo. We've heard of all the character references they go through, all these different things. It just wouldn't make sense for Toronto FC, you know, at any amount of money to bring in a player, even if he's as good as Borré, if he doesn't want to buy in at all. So I think that, you know, if there is smoke to this, I think that, you know, do I think this will happen? Who knows? But if Toronto FC are pursuing the player this hard, I think there must be at least some sort of interest on his end in coming to the club, or at least they think they can sell him on that.
See, I agree with you, but I also think that the yardsticks have changed, because this is a player in the before times who would have fetched a much higher price. So you're getting him at a deep pandemic discount. And I do think that supersedes some of the vetting that would have gone place in a vacuum, you know, in a COVID-free vacuum. I did watch him play last night, River Plate versus Argentinos Juniors, and damn, he's quality. But I will say this: they lost 1-0. So if we're looking to replace Borré and target another player, there's this guy, the number 10 for Argentinos Juniors. He scored an absolute screamer last night. Yeah.
Just scouting.
Yeah, I'm scouting.
Let's go.
Forget about Borré. Gabriel Florentine is the new TFC
That's the
DP.
new name, guys. That's the new name. Chalk it up, write it up. But no, interesting that Ali Curtis told the Toronto Sun this week that, you know, that Borré is a very good player. That was the only comment he really had, and he didn't rule out the possibility of TFC going after Borré. Mitch, I'm in the same boat as you. Is the reports have Borré holding out for a move to Europe, which
I think
again,
it's important to stress.
True.
Sorry, I think it's important to stress that it's not just a move to Europe, because he's turned down offers from championship teams or prem sides. He wants to be a starting forward on one of the big teams in the top 5 leagues. He wants Champions League.
I
Right?
wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. I mean, a player of his caliber probably does expect to play for some of the better clubs in Europe, but that report that does say that he is waiting offers from Europe. I mean, so is half of Toronto FC right now.
So am I. I'm waiting for my offer from Europe.
Yeah, I mean,
You
yeah,
know?
so am I too. Exactly, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, again, we have flashbacks of Jermaine Defoe, and obviously he wasn't all committed here. If Borré comes here, I don't think that's the case. I mean, anyone's sort of dream is to one day play soccer in Europe. I don't think anyone's dream is to play soccer for Toronto, especially someone that's not even from here, to one day play soccer for Toronto FC for their prime years of their soccer career. I don't think that's their end goal, and I think that's really unfair to ask somebody, especially someone who's like almost a global star, to have that as their end all be all. The reality is he's a very, very good player, and TFC perhaps have the best bid. And at the end of the day, if his decision, when it's time to make his decision, if that's what is the most prevalent factor, in addition to what else TFC can offer, which isn't just money, it's the fact that they're a winning side. They have a great culture. They have cross off all the boxes. They have it. TFC.
Yep.
It's just the MLS aspect of things, and if TFC are in pole position at the end of the day, if Borré accepts, I wouldn't be surprised, because, like I said, sometimes the best offer speaks, and TFC seem to be really, really interested right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's a comment on WTR. I think it was in reference to the 2017 treble, and I was saying, the team was all for one, and somebody countered and said, well, actually, no, we paid Seba and so much money that he couldn't walk. So it wasn't exactly all for one. This might be another situation with Borré, right? Like, of course, we all want the Man United shirt or whatever, but we're paying him, we're paying him stupid money in a situation. And again, I don't know if it's actually what he's worth.
Yeah, I wouldn't even call that stupid.
It's stupid money, but we're still getting him at a discount, right? So
if he came, he would be, on that reported fee, he'd be the second most expensive player in MLS, I believe. So
right. And he would be coming on a free. I always say he's coming on we'd have to pay a transfer fee, but no, his contract's up. If he would be coming on a free.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that you have to work around with that. I mean, you could potentially get him on the free if whoever played are willing to perhaps let him go a little bit earlier. But if you wanna ensure that you're that team that does have him and does sign him, perhaps you do have to pay a little bit of that transfer fee. And Ali Curtis has been on record saying that he believes that he will get the designated player signing done in the first transfer window of this offseason. So hey, perhaps TFC do pay a small transfer fee for Borré. And there's also there's a lot more details behind it, is that River Plate doesn't own all of Borré's rights. I believe Atletico Madrid owns some percentage of Borré's rights, which means that if River Plate were to hypothetically try and renegotiate a deal with them, they would have to pay Atletico Madrid a certain fee. I think somewhere around the range of like $3.54 million just to re-sign Borré. So perhaps that's another tidbit that TFC have to navigate past in order to push this over the finish line.
Do we have to negotiate with that?
I don't know that. I do know there's too much uncertainty there, but it's a complicated matter, and it just, I don't think there's a resolution coming anytime soon.
Man, nothing is straightforward right now. That's for sure.
Zero.
Let's talk about.
By the way, it's River Plate. That's how you pronounce it. It's not River Plate. It's River Plate.
I'm never ever saying that.
It's River Plate.
No, it's River Plate. It's River Plate.
Let's talk about the one player that Toronto FC is looking at. We can confirm that, and that's Josh Yarrow, who's in camp with them. Kind of, news that kind of got brushed over completely by all the other tidbits that came out this week. But a second overall pick in 2016, does have MLS experience with Philadelphia Union, who of course drafted him. A player worth taking a look at. Let's not forget he got drafted 4 spots in front of Richie Larea in that 2016 draft, who's a player that, that's best case scenario right there for Toronto FC in terms of bringing in a player on trial and what he could turn out to be. I'm not suggesting that he's going to end up, being a potentially European bound national team starter anytime soon, but It's why not is my thinking in terms of, you know, a guy who clearly had some pedigree, has some ability and experience, and yeah, why not take a flyer on the player?
Did you say he's a center back already?
Yes.
I can't remember if you. Okay, yeah.
Josh,
I mean that's
that's
one. That's 1, 2, and 3. He's a center back, and we need some of those. So I'm all for it.
Yeah, he's 26 years old. He can also play right back. And he really fits this Chris Armas type of mold. He's an athletic, physical, and pacey kind of center back who also has some composure on the ball as well, just based off what I've seen and just from talking to a few people. And another thing that I really like about him is he kind of has this leadership quality about him that has sort of excelled in championship sides, and I think of San Antonio that he played for the past 2 seasons, and that's where Jordan Peruzza went on loan last season. Actually, just fun fact to tie this to TFC thing together. And you know, I've watched like a couple, I don't want to say games, but a couple moments from San Antonio matches, and he did stand out to me as being like someone who could perhaps, you know, one day make that jump up to MLS. At the time, I didn't realize he was a former 2nd overall pick, and that's some good news to me. And I'm excited to see if this is the direction that TFC had. I know they're also linked in the past with French defender Loic Landry. And
I remember that. That was that seems like 100 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. That was at the beginning of January where they made a bid for that player. So there's a couple different options they can go with that sort of center back position, but I like his versatility as well. I like that a lot, and of course his pedigree. He's a 2nd overall pick, and he played, I think, upwards of 20-something games for the Philadelphia Union before he went down to the USL. Perhaps there is something there that a fresh change of scenario or scenery does for him. Another thing I want, another tidbit, this is something that I actually got from Chris Armas this week, or last week. And I asked him about the TFC's Super Draft picks. And to my surprise, the name that he was really most impressed with, and that was John Talon Maples. And if you guys remember, that was the name that or at least I forgot on our show that one time.
I only remember one of the twins, the Derosa twins. Yeah,
Matt Derosa. Yeah, he's a lot back there. So he was actually super impressed with John Talon Maples, and he was talking about him jostling up there with Josie Altidore in training, and how impressive it was to see someone like him do that, and just how far that he's come. Now, what I would actually expect is I actually expect them to, Mitch, you had this report earlier, but I expect them to be part of the Toronto FC2 team this season. So I'm wondering how that sort of plays into perhaps TFC's depth. If they are based in Florida, like again, the report says, it makes a lot of sense to have players who are training with your first team kind of integrate themselves with that, because you can kind of, I'm not sure how this works, but I believe you can call some of the TFC2 players up to your first team if you need it, right?
There's emergency things in place for that, provided injury or COVID, which would probably be the case this year.
Huge, which is huge. So we can talk about TFC's lack of center back, lack of depth at center back, but I mean, you go down the line, there's a couple youngsters that are capable of filling in. Again, if we add Joshua to that mix, that's great news for TFC. But also look out for John Talon Maples, because I do expect him to one day potentially play a role for this club, just based on the way that Armas is speaking about him. I'm really excited for that. One more small timid is that Matt Derosa. I don't know if he cracks the first team right away. I don't know if he does, and I know that a lot of people said that Matt Derosa was MLS ready. He was almost one of the more MLS ready players out of the draft. Chris Armas said some positive things about him, like he's always tuned on. He never really turns off, but just reading in between the lines, it almost sounds as if he's more so in line to play a role with TFC2 next season. So then you think about Toronto FC's depth at left back, and aside from Justin Morrow, there's not really a natural left back on that roster. So I think that's a position that I'm really intrigued to see how TFC use. I know Justin Morrow is also battling a little bit of a calf injury right now. So really, really interested to see who's kind of holding down that starting spot. I imagine it'd be one of Oro or Richie Larea. But behind them, who's the person right now? Is it perhaps a Griffin Dorsey? Is it perhaps a Nick DeLeon? We've seen that in the past. There's question marks there, though, at least. And I mean, perhaps Matt Derosa perhaps isn't that answer right away that perhaps some were hyping him up to be.
Didn't somebody suggest Schaff makes the Larea switch
I like
to a left
that.
back? Yeah,
I like that. Someone in our WTR comment thread suggested Schaff as a left back, and it gave me it remind me right away of Raheem Edwards, and when he was kind of converted to that outside back position, left back position. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I go that far, but I like the thinking. I like the thinking.
Nice. We got a question here, which is with all this talk about all these new fangled center backs, what about Julian Dunn?
Great question, Colin. And I would throw Dunn under that same category as Josh Yarrow. And he's an athletic center back. He's good on the ball. He can get into tackles, and I think he's a player that Chris Armas will actually enjoy. With that being said, I do think he's a little bit further away than perhaps some are perceiving him to be, even though he had a fantastic run in the Canadian Premier League. I still don't know if he's quite MLS ready. But with that being said, I mean, he's in a position right now to eat up minutes, especially if TFC don't sign Josh Yarrow. Right now, Toronto C's depth at center back is Omar Gonzalez, Chris Mavinga, Eric Zavaleta, and then you got Julian Dunn. Mm-hmm. So hey,
Rocco, who's
Rock's on loan until June. Yeah. So I mean, we'll see. We'll keep an eye on Julian Dunn, and perhaps he does work his way into the side, especially under a condensed schedule, which Toronto FC are going to have to endure. But again, I think he's sort of that similar player to Josh Yarrow.
This is sort of neither here nor there, but like with Dunn and with any of the Canadian Premier League guys, like one thing that it's worth keeping in mind is that sure, it was a full season, but it was like 7 games or so.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't a massive sample size for any of these young players. So, you know, even guys who have breakout CAMPL tournaments, like I'd almost want to see what they can do this next year in a full season. In terms of, you know, their ability, like a Mo Farsi, all those guys. So that's something that's worth keeping in mind when you know, reading too much into what they did in the Canadian Premier League.
You raised an interesting you put an interesting thought in my head, which is, you know, when we're playing condensed schedule with limited travel as a consequence of pandemic, doesn't that make it even more attractive to start playing the kids because you're eliminating some of the variables that make MLS so MLS-y, like the cross continental flights and the jet lag and the layovers and stuff like that. So, you know, it gives you a different sample size because, like you were saying, you know, everybody's raving about Julian Dunn, but when you scratch at the statistics, you're like, yeah, well, you know, the guy only played 7 games over the course of, like, you know, a 2-month spurt. And so the same asterisks would apply to Julian, you know, potentially Io, who we now have to see again in this context because, you know, but yeah, I mean, it is a proving ground with asterisks, I guess. Yeah. Again, I just had this thought, so I haven't quite figured it all out in my head yet. But
one more on that is that Armas has a history of running out younger center backs. He did it with the New York Red Bulls, and perhaps he'll do it here with Toronto FC with the cards that he's dealt. Because aside, again, we've gone over this a number of times. Aside from Omar Gonzalez and Chris Mavinga, there's question marks at center back for TFC, and I believe some of those solutions will be in the form of some younger players.
If we're being honest, there's question marks with Mavinga and Gonzalez as well, but you know, it's more with respect to consistency than technical ability, right? And just, you know, how many minutes are we going to get out of their legs over the course of a season? So yeah,
question marks is relative because I mean, I think any team in MLS would be happy starting the year with a pairing of Omar Gonzalez and Chris Mavinga.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's finish up on one thing that we've talked about for multiple weeks now, but got confirmed recently, which is that Toronto FC is heading south. They're heading to Florida. They're going to be based out of Orlando, the Omni Resorts, and potentially might be playing games Orlando and Tampa, depending upon the schedule. So, obviously the hope is that they can return to BMO Field at some point this season. That was part of what they wanted to do in their agreement, was build in a mechanism wherein they can very quickly, pick up or fold up camp and come back to Canada if any of the restrictions so allow them. We'll see, but at least for the foreseeable future, they're going to be in Florida with at least two of the other Canadian teams in terms or Toronto teams.
How do you feel about this? I mean, all concerns are minor at this point, but like, remember when Hartford was being touted and people are like, well, what makes Hartford and what makes it really special is that the dimensions of the pitch are very similar to BMO Field, and it's grass as opposed to turf. And you're not hearing any of this in our new road trip this year, right? It's going to be hot, but like, what is the field situation like in both of these places? And, is there an advantage to Tampa's? Is Tampa a speedier field than Exploria Stadium sort of thing? It's just that we're not talking about that. And I just find it interesting. I mean, I'm not surprised because we need a home at this point where, it's more important to have a place to play than, how long the grass is. But, it's no secret that Michael Bradley has made sport of making groundskeepers at BMO's lives hell. So, I mean,
TFC have held training camp there in the last couple of seasons. So, I mean, there is some history there of TFC, being comfortable on that pitch. And we talk about, Mitch, as you pointed out, the TFC have that clause there that allows them to pull out and, just return home whenever they want. I'm hopeful that it is this summer, and just based on the way that vaccinations are going, and you can talk about all that stuff, but there's at least hope that one day, that this season potentially, that we will return to BMO Field. And that's honestly a lot more than I could say a year ago, and a lot more than I could say just like even 6 months ago. So if there is, light at the end of the tunnel for TFC fans that are upset about this news about TFC going down to Florida, is that the fact that they do have this clause in there and they are hoping to return to BMO Field. And if news indicates anything, it's possible. It is possible.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also with Florida, I like it's gets really hot there during the summer, and we've talked about that, right? And it makes sense that TFC would start the season down in Florida for the first couple of months, and then hopefully get back to BMO later on, because like I said, the TFC has complained in the past about the summer months being a little bit too hot there. We talked about the MLS's back tournament. I doubt it's somewhere they want to be during the summer. So hey guys, read into that what you will. Let's hope for the best.
Hey, so if they could get acclimatized, they could have a bit of an advantage there. That, maybe wouldn't be the case with anywhere else they set up shop. So, hey,
it should be interesting. I mean, Exploria Stadium's a nice ground. I'm sure the Tampa Bay Mutiny.
It's not Exploria, right?
Oh, they're not doing Exploria. Where are they playing?
They're not at Exploria.
How does Orlando have two?
Do we know?
We do know. Well, we know where they're training out of. We do know where they're training out of.
I don't know if we know where they're playing games out of yet. I don't think they said that.
Okay.
Yeah, they didn't announce the venue for their games, but they are playing out of Omni Resort at Champions Gate in Orlando. So they're training there. And I also know that there's a bunch of preseason games that are being held there as well. So that's also something to keep an eye on, is TFC have yet to announce their sort of preseason schedule. Obviously, it's tough with the Canadian Championship, and you have Club Leon on April 7th. But with some of the teams that are down there at Omni Resort, or whatever you call it, I imagine
Great Wolf Lodge. They're playing at Great Wolf Lodge. Yeah,
I imagine that there will be a couple of preseason games there for sure. So we'll wait to hear more on that.
Yeah, let's wrap things up here. Hopefully by next week we can be talking about an actual game. Who knows what? Another
The
week
Olympic
in this
roster didn't
crazy
drop for you, Mitch.
situation.
Mitch, I saw
No,
you
it didn't.
looking,
Yeah,
and no Olympics to talk about. So Mitch is sad.
yeah, we'll see. Well, we anticipate the Olympic roster dropping at some point today. We already
Pretty
know
much a minute after we wrap. Yeah.
Yeah, probably. We already know at least a few of the players there, but yeah, thanks so much, Kevin, Sophia. Hopefully, some exciting stuff coming up soon. Thanks to Jeff and Michael as always for all the talk this show. And like I said, hopefully by next week we can talk about some actual games as you know these things figure themselves out. Till next Tuesday.
Ciao.
Better. Cheers.